Power of the Dragon. If you like our show, please hit the subscribe button below, and you can also hit the bell for notifications. We also have a Joyful Mama blog, and if you would like to just learn more about our mission, you can subscribe to our blog as well. I'm here with poor Oscar Rocky. He's really sad today because Annika, his sweet Annika, is off to college now and he misses her. So he's been kind of ornery this week. It's a week of big changes. The boys are going back to school and we just got a lot of changes going on in our life. We've had an exciting summer, but I'm kind of ready to settle down and move forward with some different things. So we're going to be doing some changes in how we do our videos too. They're going to be more educational, and we're going to be doing some cooking videos, which I'm kind of excited about. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you want to know, I have a love-hate relationship with food. Why is that, you wonder? Well, I have been on a very extremely bland and restrictive diet for about 10 years since I had a tick bite and came down with Lyme disease. It totally destroyed my digestive system. I've had all sorts of problems. I have chronic SIBO and dysbiosis, which is a intestinal disorder. And it's just been a big frustration with me. I just get really frustrated. I try to eat certain foods and just about everything causes inflammation for me. And it's just been really hard. It's been kind of a bummer. But I've tried to embrace it and doing that. I've tried to learn how to cook foods and make the best of what I do. I do fun things with flavors and just have a good time with what I make. In the past, I've had problems with weight and weight gain and things like that. And when I did get sick, I lost well over 100 pounds. And that was part of the process. I'd like to say that, hey, that's a great thing. I lost weight, but it was kind of scary. At times, I got pretty thin there for a while because it's not... it was good to lose weight when I went off gluten and dairy and sugar and a lot of those inflammatory foods, but there were periods where my weight got down pretty low and I was pretty thin. But I feel like I've maintained that pretty good. So that is a positive, and all this frustration, there are some good things. Unfortunately, foods that would be considered as healthy for most people are inflammatory and problematic for me. So it's been a big frustration. My practitioner wants me to go on another diet change. I've been on multiple diets over the years, trying to figure out the best way to heal my digestive system. I've been on the GAPS diet off and on for several years since I had Lyme disease. It's been very healing, but there's some aspects of it that is inflammatory for me as well. So that's going to be one of the big changes coming up. Today in this episode, I wanted to do some cooking, and I want to do some recipes based on the GAPS diet because I have enjoyed some of the creativity in doing some unique cooking. I do like to rise the challenge. The things I'm cooking are actually considered inflammatory for me, so this is kind of my last moment of just enjoying some food before I take it out of my diet and take a break and try to heal my digestive system by going back to really adhere to a stricter, more boring probably diet for a while. Anyway, so I am going to be making a couple different kinds of bread. And the first bread that I'm going to make is based on this book by neurologist and founder of the GAPS diet, Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. It's called GAPS almond bread or nut bread. I'm going to make it with almonds and pistachios. So, in videoing the cooking process for making it, I have to soak my nuts for a certain period of time to make them more digestive. I dehydrate them, and then I blend the nuts in a blender to make a flour. And then I'll show you how to make a bread out of this. And the challenge in this is taking simple ingredients and making great flavor. So that's kind of what my plan is for our first cooking challenge. In order to soak nuts, you have to put them in a glass bowl. It has to be glass. It can't be metal. So I put this a pound of almonds and a pound of pistachios in a glass bowl. Then you add some water. That's about 4 cups of water there that I added. You just add enough to cover all the nuts. And then you add some Himalayan salt, usually a couple tablespoons. I'm just going to put some in here. Then you want to take your nuts and cover them up with a tea towel or some type of towel and put it in a cool or room temperature dark place for at least 12 to somewhere like 12 to 24 hours. Okay, so I have spread out all of my nuts evenly on about 4 or 5 tiers. I spread them all out evenly. There's a fan going on in this, and it's just a very low, dry heat, just barely above room temperature. So it'll be they'll be sitting on the dehydrator with the fan blowing for at least 12 hours till they get nice and crispy. When you soak the nuts, they expand and they get kind of soft and squishy, and so they have kind of a weird taste if you eat them that way. They are edible, but they taste better if you dehydrate them. So the recipe for when you make a GAPS-friendly almond bread, you need some kind of wet ingredient to adhere to the bread to pull it all together, because it's kind of like a quick bread, like you make a zucchini bread. They recommend sometimes for like the pancake recipe that goes there to use like a squash or a zucchini. And this I'm using actually a butternut squash, which is higher in carbs, and then some rhubarb. So I'm going to cook this down until it gets soft, and then I'll add that to the flour. All right, let me check it. So I put it on the pulse setting, and you want to put it long enough till it's finely ground. So let's just check it. That looks pretty good. It's still a little coarse, but I think that'll work for the flour. So with the GAPS recipe, they usually call for 2 cups of flour. I'm kind of gotten so I kind of go by sight, and this is probably more than 2 cups of flour, but I'm gonna divide it out into 2 pans, and I'm gonna make 2 real small thin loaves. Okay, now it's time to pull together the ingredients that will make your bread taste good. I like to have some flavor because of me typically being on a bland diet and not having a lot of options. I like to punch some flavor in my bread, so I get a little crazy. And so I really want a good flavor, so I chopped up a bunch of fresh organic ginger that I get at the health food store. And I also grabbed a bunch of peppermint and a little pineapple sage just for fun to add to my bread. So I'm just going to add this now to my mixture. So anyway, added all this in. So I'm going to blend all this great flavor in there, and we'll see how it turns out. This is a little more than I typically do. And then we got to add our wet ingredients. Now, there are a recipe you can follow, and I will be sure to put a link with a recipe on this description, but since I've been doing this about 3 or 4 years, I tend to just go by sight and just figure out like kind of what consistency I want my bread instead of following a recipe. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For the most part, I usually have success. Okay, so I stewed my wet ingredients. So I have some squash and some rhubarb. So we'll just ladle some of that in there. I'll put that directly in my mixture. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off with some of it. I'm going to put some of it in there, and I'm going to blend it and see kind of what consistency it is. So I added some in there, and now I'm going to put the lid on the food processor. Okay, so I ended up putting all of the wet ingredient, including the water, in there. So I just want to make sure it gets a certain consistency, and it seemed like it needed all of it. So look at this. It's this beautiful green color. It smells so delicious. It smells like peppermint, ginger. It's just got a real nice spicy smell. So I'm really excited to see how this will turn out. It's got a pretty green color from the pistachio and from the peppermint. So anyway, now we got to prepare our baking dishes. I have the oven baked at 350 preheating, and it looks like it just went to 350. So now we got to get our pans ready so that we can scoop this up. All right, so I have 2 glass pans here, and I use those for my bread dishes. I like the glass ones. And this mixture, I don't use spray because it has soy and other chemicals I don't like. And this mixture, if you don't have liberal amounts of oil on the bottom, it will stick. And so this probably looks like an awful lot of oil, and you're probably thinking, ew, but it really, honestly, it doesn't get greasy at all. I mentioned earlier that I use rhubarb and butternut squash as my wet ingredients. Now you can use typically just about anything you want. It just has to be something to bind to the flour and make it at a certain consistency. So some of that, like in the GAPS diet, some of the recommendations are eggs. So you can use eggs. You can use avocado. You can use like coconut oil or ghee. Another thing that you can do is you can add fruit. So like blueberries, for instance. Sometimes I put blueberries in there. Or you can, I make a homemade GAPS applesauce, and you can put that in there too. And so you can put whatever, pretty much whatever you want in there. Okay, so I let my food cook just a little more than an hour, more like about an hour, 10 or 15 minutes, just to be sure, because it's a little thicker than I sometimes make my bread. I usually make it pretty thin. And we tested, it looks like it's pretty clean through. It looks like it's all done. So now we pull out our bread. It smells delicious. It's got a nice golden color. So now we're gonna let it sit for about 10 minutes and then we'll see how it turned out. And look at that, it's a perfect loaf of bread, and it only slightly broke. But it's a beautiful loaf of bread, and I don't care if it breaks a little bit. It's so delicious. I took a sample of it. It's delicious. It has a great ginger flavor. It tastes like kind of like a rhubarb cobbler. I love it. So now all we got to do is cut it up, and then I usually freeze it. All right, it's all done. This has actually turned out beautifully for the bread, so you can see the consistency in the inside. It's really nice and soft. It's a little crumbly because, again, it's a gluten-free bread. It's a quick bread, but for someone who can't have any kind of grains or dairy, it really turned out perfect, and it's got a nice spicy flavor. It's kind of reminds me of a pumpkin bread. So I would say this is a successful bread. All right, now that I made the nut and pistachio bread, which was delicious, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm going to miss it, I am now going to do something that is not quite as tasty, but just kind of fun and exciting because it's funky and different, and that is making a similar loaf of bread, but instead of using nuts, I'm going to use avocado pits. You might be going, what? Yes, avocado pits. I know that sounds crazy, but you can actually make flour out of avocado seeds. What I'm going to make is something that may have never been done before, but I'm looking forward to sharing with you how to do something just fun and interesting and creative. You can always use every part of your food, and that's kind of something I get excited about, is you don't need to waste anything. So that's going to be what we're going to do next. The benefit of using avocado flour is, for some people, it is actually healing for the gut. It may not be so healing for me, but I've seen some things like on Dr. Miracola's website and some articles that have said that it's good for you to actually eat avocado seeds. So we're going to give it a try. Okay, so I have my avocados peeled, and I stored away in the freezer. And so now I have the pits here, and I'm just going to stick them right in this water to blanch them. And just let them cook in the boiling water for a while. And then I'm going to soak them when they're done. Okay, so I blanched these for about 5 to 10 minutes. And so now they're ready to go. So I'm going to put them directly in this bowl here. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse them off. Now I'm just going to add some filtered water to them. So it's covered up. So I got them water in there. And then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of sea salt. Alright, there you go. I'm going to cover these up, and I'm going to let them sit for about 24 hours, and then they should be ready to make flour. You don't have to dehydrate the avocado seeds like you do the nuts, because You want them to be as soft as possible to make it easier to process them. Okay, I did some gardening earlier today, and I picked a bunch of cucumbers, some squash, zucchini squash, and a little bit of rhubarb to make some bread with the rhubarb. And so I'm getting ready to put everything together to make an avocado seed bread. We'll see how it goes. All right, so I thought it'd be fun with making this bread if I used all ingredients from our yard and our garden. So I have some zucchini that I grew myself, some rhubarb, and those are apples. They're a little bit bruised, but since they're going in for cooking, they'll be fine. I like to use apples from our apple trees to make homemade applesauce that I like to eat. So I am going to put all the stuff in a pan. I may not use it all for my bread, but whatever I don't use, I'll repurpose for something else, because that's how I do things. So I'm just going to stick this all in a pan here, and I'm going to cook it on the stove for a while until it gets soft. Okay, so these are my blanched and soaked avocado seeds. I blanched them in boiling water for about 15 minutes a couple days ago, and I've been soaking them in Himalayan salt water. So now I'm going to take them out and prepare them. Okay, so I have my rhubarb, zucchini, apple compote going right now to add for my wet ingredients for my bread. These are what my avocado seeds look like. And I am going to try to grate them with a cheese grater. I'm going to lift this up a little bit. Okay, so is this going to be hard to see? It's just too hard to do this by seeing all of it. So I'm just going to kind of show you. So I just take this and I start off by grating it. So it's interesting, the last time I did this, I didn't blanch it, and so some of the skin on the avocado was on there, and it was red. It made the bread look kind of a cool, funky red color. This is white because I blanched it this time. And so I am just shredding it like you would shred cheese or a vegetable of some sort. So I'm going to shred it until it gets down to the point where I can't shred it anymore. And then I'm going to finally chop the rest of it. I can tell you that because I did blanch it ahead of time, it is shredding beautifully. And it's shredding a lot easier. Between blanching and soaking for, I soaked it for like about 36 hours, or more. 36 to 40 hours, so it is really shredding really nice. So this is going to make my life a lot easier. So started what the shredded avocado seed looks like. It kind of looks like coconut or some kind of cheese. It's kind of cool looking. So I'm going to just keep shredding, and I'm going to finally chop the rest of it, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do next. I do want to say that I don't know if this has ever been done before. I did make I made an avocado seed / nut bread about a month ago, and it turned out really good. Just make sure you add extra sweetener with it, because avocado seed is a little more bitter, so that's why this one I'm adding rhubarb and apple. I thought that would, I don't do any sugar, so I thought that would add to the sweetness. All right, here's my shredded avocado, which looks very similar to coconut. Like I mentioned, it's a little bit bitter in flavor, so you need to add other flavors to counteract that. So what better way than doing mint? I grow a ton of different kinds of mint in the summertime. So I have like peppermint, spearmint, chocolate peppermint, mojita peppermint, and I just have fun with different plants to try to grow. And then I also have some pineapple sage, which I've been using this summer. It's been kind of a fun flavor. So I'm going to add that with the shredded coconut into the food processor and mix that in to make my flour. Okay, so I got it in the food processor, so I'm going to put the lid on now. Okay, so this is what the flour looks like after it's been blended. I just blended the peppermint right with it. If you don't blanch it and you leave the skin on, it's kind of a rusty orange color, but since I blanched it, this is a beautiful white color with a little bit of green tint from the mint that I put on there. So now this is probably about a cup and a half, I would say a cup and a half, probably not quite 2 cups. So I think we can still make it work though, and I think we can make a nice loaf of bread. I always put ginger in everything because ginger is my absolute favorite flavor. So I cut up a bunch of ginger here that I'm going to add. And you want to have plenty of spice and flavor in this bread, again, to counteract the bitterness of avocados. So I am just going to add a little bit of my apple, rhubarb, zucchini compote here. And I'm going to just add a little bit to start off with, because if you get too much, then it's going to fall apart. So the apple, I don't typically put this much apple in a bread, but again, because of the bitterness, I thought maybe that would counteract it. And since this is kind of my last rebel bread, I thought, why the heck not? So I'm going to start off with this. This is probably more than enough, and I'm going to blend this together to make my batter. All right, it was actually just enough flour to make a small loaf, and so the color is pretty. It's got a little bit of green flecks from the peppermint. I think the combination of the peppermint, apple, rhubarb, and ginger is going to make a nice spicy flavor for it. So now, just like I did with the almond bread, I well greased the pan, the bread pan, with coconut oil. I got the oven preheated for 350, and now I'm going to bake our bread for about an hour at 350. All right, so it's all done. I cut up our bread. It's a little bit soft in the middle, and that's because I had too much liquid ingredients, but once I freeze it, it'll be nice and firm. This was two of the firmest pieces of bread, and I put it in a bowl with my raspberry compote, so I'm going to have that for dessert. And I'm really looking forward to having this special treat. It's not something I should be eating regularly because it is going to cause some inflammation for me, but it is delicious, and it's a great alternative for someone that can't have cake or cookies or things like that. So it's nice to me having my special dessert treat once in a while. Okay, so now I'm going to eat my rhubarb apple compote with my ginger, peppermint, rhubarb, apple, avocado seed bread that is gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free, and it's based on a recipe from the GAPS diet. I don't like to follow specific recipes. I like to cook by sight and experience. So I would say this was a moderately successful dish, and I'm looking forward to eating it. The bread is a little heavy on the ginger. I went a little bit too far this time with it, but it's good for me. Some people probably too strong, but it's got a very heavy ginger flavor. So I would say in the future, if I made this, I would go a little bit less in the ginger, but it does definitely counteract with the bitterness of the avocado seeds. So I would say, again, this is a moderately successful dish. Not quite as good as the pistachio and almond bread, but very good and very tasty with the compote.
Thank you very much for joining us today. If you liked what you saw today, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, and then please be sure to hit the subscribe button below, and then be sure to hit the notification bell so that you can receive notifications on all of our future videos. We are on social media, and you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Joyful Mama. Otherwise, we will also link that in the description below. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Bye, guys.